If you have sprayed a line of ants and watched them vanish, only to see the same trail return within a week, you never actually solved the problem. There's a $2 powder old farmhouse used long before pest sprays existed, and it works by doing the opposite of what most people expect. That powder is borax, also known as sodium borate, and there's a good chance you already have a box of it in your laundry room without realizing it doubles as one of the oldest pest control tools in American history. Borax is a naturally occurring mineral mined from dry lake beds in places like Death Valley, and it has been sold as a household staple since the late 1800s, originally hauled out of the desert by teams of mules before trucks and trains made it easier to transport. For well over a century, families used it for laundry, cleaning, and dealing with insects, all from the same box. Now here's the part that surprises most people. If your goal is to kill an entire ant colony, an instant kill spray is actually working against you. When you spray the ants, you can see you are only killing the foragers, the scouts that wandered out looking for food. The queen, the larvae, and the bulk of the colony are tucked away underground or inside a wall, completely untouched. Within days, the colony simply produces more foragers, and the trail comes right back, often in the exact same spot, because the colony itself was never affected at all. This is exactly why the slow-acting nature of borax is the entire point, not a flaw. Borax interferes with an ant's digestive system, but it does not act instantly. A forager ant can pick it up, carry it back to the nest, and still be alive long enough to share it with other ants through a behavior called trophallaxis, which is essentially how ants feed each other and feed their larvae and queen mouth to mouth. In other words, the ants carry the very thing that will eliminate the colony directly to the queen themselves, without you ever needing to find the nest. So how do you actually put this together for about $2? The classic ratio that has been used for generations is 1 part borax to 3 parts sugar. You mix this with a small amount of warm water until it forms a thick syrup, almost like a thin sugar paste. The sugar acts as the bait that attracts the ants, while the borax rides along hidden inside it. You can soak a few cotton balls in this mixture, or place small amounts into bottle caps, the lids from plastic containers, or even folded pieces of cardboard, and set these out near where you have been seeing ant activity. One important note here, because this is where a lot of people get it wrong. Not all ants are equally attracted to sugar. Some species, often called grease ants or certain types of house ants, are more interested in protein and fats than sugar. There is also a seasonal pattern worth knowing about. Colonies tend to favor protein-based foods more heavily in spring, when they are actively raising new larvae that need protein to develop, and shift toward sugar-based foods later in the season, once the colony has matured and is focused more on storing energy. If you set out a sugar-based bait and the ants seem to ignore it completely, try a second version, using a small amount of peanut butter mixed with borax instead. Putting out both a sugar-based bait and a protein-based bait at the same time covers your bases, since you may be dealing with more than one type of ant, or simply catching the colony during a phase where its preferences have shifted. Before you even get to placement, it helps to know what kind of ant you are actually dealing with, because this changes which bait works best and how quickly. The small, dark ants that show up in kitchens, often called odorous house ants, give off a smell similar to rotten coconut if you accidentally crush one, which is a quick way to confirm what you are looking at. These are usually sugar lovers and respond well to the syrup-based bait. Pavement ants, the ones you often see along sidewalk cracks and foundations, tend to go after both sugar and grease, so either bait can work on them. Carpenter ants are a different situation entirely. They are noticeably larger, often black or reddish black, and if you are seeing them indoors in any real number, it can be a sign of moisture damage somewhere in the wood structure of your home. Bait can still help reduce their numbers, but if carpenter ants are your issue, it is worth also checking for damp or softwood nearby, since the ants are often a symptom of that underlying moisture problem rather than the root cause itself. Placement matters just as much as the recipe itself. The instinct most people have is to find the anthill or the crack where ants are entering and dump the mixture directly there. This is actually one of the biggest mistakes, because a large pile of anything unfamiliar near the nest entrance can make ants avoid the area entirely, or in some cases cause the colony to relocate further away, which makes your problem worse, not better. Instead, place small amounts of bait directly along the trail the ants are already using, ideally a short distance away from the entry point itself. You want the ants to find it during their normal foraging route and treat it like any other food source they stumbled upon. Now let us talk about what actually happens after you set this out, because this is where the title needs a little honesty. In the first 24 hours, you will often notice something that looks alarming at first, which is more ants showing up at the bait, not fewer. This is actually a good sign. Ants that find a strong food source recruit other ants to help carry it back, so a temporary increase in activity around the bait usually means it is working exactly as intended. Over the next day or two, as the borax starts affecting the ants that fed on it and shared it with the colony, you will typically see the trail itself start to thin out and eventually stop being used altogether. For the visible trail in your home, this noticeable drop often does happen within about 24 to 48 hours. However, fully eliminating the colony, including the queen and the deeper population you cannot see, generally takes longer, often somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks, depending on the size of the colony and how reliably the ants kept feeding on the bait. If you are dealing with a particularly large or established colony, patience is genuinely the key ingredient here. Resist the urge to clean up the bait stations after the first day just because you do not see immediate results everywhere. Removing the bait too early is one of the most common reasons this method appears to fail, when in reality, it simply needed more time to work its way through the colony. A quick word on safety, since borax is something you are intentionally placing around your home. While it has a long history as a household product, it is not something that should be left out where small children or pets can easily access it, since ingesting a significant amount can cause stomach upset in both people and animals. Using small, covered bait stations like a bottle cap turned upside down with a tiny entry gap or a folded piece of cardboard keeps the bait accessible to ants while keeping it out of reach for curious hands or paws. There is something worth appreciating about the fact that this approach has barely changed in well over 100 years. The borax sold under the well-known 20 Mule Team name traces back to mining operations in California and Nevada in the late 1800s, where teams of mules were genuinely used to haul wagon loads of the mineral out of remote desert basins because no railroad reached those areas yet. Once it made its way into general stores across the country, families found it useful for far more than laundry. And pest control was one of its most common secondary uses for generations, long before specialized insecticides were sold in stores. Long before anyone could walk into a store and buy a specialized ant killer, families dealt with the exact same kitchen and pantry ant problems using a mineral dug out of the ground and whatever sugar or fat they had on hand. The method works not because it is old-fashioned for the sake of nostalgia, but because the underlying biology of how ants share food has not changed at all. And a slow-acting bait that the colony carries home itself will always outperform something that only kills what you can see. If you try this, give it a full week before deciding whether it worked, and keep the bait stations fresh by replacing them every few days if the original mixture dries out or gets eaten down. And if ants are not your biggest problem right now, there's another $2 pantry item that handles a completely different pest, using this exact same delayed bait principle, and that is exactly what the next video is about. So stay subscribed for that one. Let me know in the comments which type of ant you are dealing with, the small, dark ones in the kitchen or the larger ones outdoors, because that actually changes which bait works best, and I will cover that in more detail soon.